Welcome to our session on why the time has come to disrupt mobile application development. I am Hilary Carter. I'm pleased to be your moderator for today's discussion. And I lead the research program at the Linux Foundation. I work with Frank Nagel, who joined us today as chief economist. And we've been producing research since I joined the LF in 2021, empirically studying open source trends, opportunities, and challenges using both qualitative and quantitative methodologies and sometimes mixed methods approaches. I previously led a think tank that was singularly focused on blockchain technology before joining the Linux Foundation. I have a background in financial services, as well as digital and media consulting, and I'm based in Toronto, Canada, and it's great to have you with us today. Today's session, what we're going to talk about, I'm briefly going to set the stage on the topic and use evidence from existing research that we have previously published on a new direction for the mobile industry, looking at the role of open source to transform the mobile application ecosystem, very briefly. And then we're going to have a panel discussion with subject matter experts, who I will introduce a little bit later. And then we're going to hear from the Open Mobile Hub project, taking a deep dive into one of open source's leading projects to create new opportunities to positively transform the integration for services and the experience for for mobile application developers. So let's dig in. In 2023, one of our first industry reports that was specific to the mobile environment was this one, a new direction for the mobile industry. And what we were doing is making the case for a new mobile application ecosystem that would be accelerated through open source. In this study, we looked at some of the challenges that the mobile ecosystem was experiencing, both in terms of antitrust and other barriers to entry, as well as exploring projects such as the Open Mobile Hub, Overture Maps Foundation, Native Script, OpenJS Foundation, and the Mobile Native Foundation, and how these projects were already like-minded and creating projects and communities that were trying to build a better future to really strengthen the mobile industry and to create opportunities for new market entrants. So this project can be found on linuxfoundation.org/research, or you can scan the QR code. And I'll dig into a few of the project's key findings. Primarily, this report really highlighted through the qualitative interview process with roughly a dozen subject matter experts that there was a need for a more open application development ecosystem. And why was this? Well, if we turn back the clock 3 years ago, really there was tremendous market dominance by only two players. 99% of smartphones were running on either Android or iOS. And that market dominance really slowed progress. It limited the opportunities for new market entrants. It drove up costs. It stunted growth, and it really slowed progress. There was sort of a bit of a walled garden approach, if you will. And the whole spirit of open source is to create new opportunities and to democratize innovation. And we see this happening time and time again in other project communities like the Overture Maps Foundation, which was created to create a more open map ecosystem, because primarily the two map providers are Google Maps and Apple Maps, and Overture Maps is creating new opportunities for map innovators everywhere. And so this was a kind of related concept. Also, the regulatory environment, the antitrust regulation that exists in the United States, and the fines that were imposed, such as those issued by the European Union, were an indicator that perhaps the way we were doing things today was not the most efficient way. And so here opened the door for open source to create a new way forward, a new direction for the mobile industry, and for open source software specifically and open source projects, like those previously mentioned, like the Open Mobile Hub and Native Script and Overture Maps Foundation. to offer new opportunities for increased transparency, community engagement, enhancing security as well as another big opportunity, faster time to market, and lower cost of ownership. So that was really quite exciting. Fast forward to today, and it's time for a new study. Why? Because the landscape has once again changed. What it means to have a mobile device is taking on a new form, and that's what we're really digging into in this new report. This report, expanding the vision for the mobile industry, will be published in a few weeks, and it's been sponsored by the Open Mobile Hub project. And it too is based on a qualitative approach. But this time, there are 23 interviews with subject matter experts across 10 different countries. So it really takes a rich dive into today's mobile application development landscape and looking at new types of mobile apps, those created for TV and automotive and other types of hardware, AR devices and so on. What it means to have a mobile device today is really changing. And so the opportunities to innovate in this space are really quite exciting. I'm very pleased to say that two of the interviewees and their expertise in this report are here with us today, and they're our panelists, Daniel Goldschei and Richard Bian. You'll hear from them a little bit later, but please stay tuned. We have a forward from my colleague Mike Wooster, who's been a long-time leader at the Linux Foundation, pretty much one of the people here from day one. And we're excited to present this update. So stay tuned for new research. But I am going to share a few of the findings with you today, which is more reason to stay tuned for the launch of this report. So as I mentioned previously, the landscape is still dominated by Android and iOS, but there are many new emerging platforms like Fire OS, Harmony OS, Horizon OS, and these have significant usage and significant installs, and they're gaining traction in the marketplace. So development for these operating systems needs to evolve with the times and the need. 1.75 billion installs, just to give you an example of the penetration. And so as the number of mobile platforms keeps growing, building a native version of your application for each one of these platforms is a pain point. It delays releases, it adds risk and complexity, slowing time to market, and so on. And every mobile platform requires support from default services. When we think of services like payments and authentication and other types of services that consumers come to expect on their mobile device. And so that's a market demand that needs to be met. And what we find now is that cross-platform development delivers clear wins. Ideally, we want to be able to develop once and have an application work across all of these different operating systems. This will lower the time to market, lower costs, and lower costs related to things like debugging. And at the same time, cross-platform networks and platforms still have gaps that need to be addressed. They're mainly supporting Android with GMS and iOS, but not emerging platforms. And they rarely support the services, the default services for these alternatives. The Open Mobile Hub, which we'll take a deep dive into, aims to fill the gap in this ecosystem. And we're really excited to hear from Diego Zuluaga later today to explore the opportunities for Open Mobile Hub to improve service delivery in the new context of an expanding open mobile ecosystem. So with that, I'd like to invite panelists to please step forward and take seats, grab their microphones. Welcome Richard, Sikang, Bian from the Ant Group, Daniel Goldschei from the Open Wallet Foundation, Saurabh Goyal from Open Mobile Hub, and Jang from Cross Platform Korea. So please give them a warm welcome. And I'll come down and I will start my timer. Okay, so we can keep on time because we have a short presentation afterward from Diego. You know what, I might switch microphones for later. Okay. Okay, on mic 6. All right, so welcome everybody. I might just stand so I can see everyone. So, challenges and frictions within the mobile application landscape. My first question is to Saurabh Goyal from the Open Mobile Hub project. Saurabh, to kick us off, when we talk about fragmentation in open mobile app development, it's often framed around devices or platforms. But let's dig into the real friction. What are the biggest pain points that developers and users face today when integrating their services and APIs like maps, authentication, and payments?
Yeah, you are, thank you, Hilary. You are absolutely right. Most attention today goes to fragmentation at device and OS level. But the real friction comes at the service integration layer, right? So for developers, for example, when they are trying to integrate a particular service, they end up integrating multiple SDKs for the same service, right? And as you earlier mentioned, this leads to increased fragmentation, increased time to market, slower product development, and so on. Additionally, because of this challenge, there are also high switching costs. So if a provider, if an app integrates a provider, to move to a different provider requires a rewrite of the app and also sometimes significant UI changes. And this again leads to a lot of challenges with product development and time to market.
Excellent, thank you. To Richard now. Richard, and please take a moment to introduce yourself when you begin your answer. But you've helped scale open source practices inside one of the world's largest technology companies. From a governance and global strategy lens, what opportunities do you see for empowering developers to better support today's increasingly diverse and global mobile ecosystem, especially in terms of services that app developers can easily integrate?
Hi everyone, my name is Richard and I work for Ant Group, which is a financial technology company. It's a master company of Alipay. So before this, I've been working with a company called Square, so which is also fintech service. So I got invited for this research in partly because I've been a full stack developer at one time. And at Square, we have we have a pretty talented Android team. Yeah, and compared to Ant Group, we're actually building mobile applications in very different ways. So the way I'm kind of looking at it is like, first thing first, I would say that when you have like a 99% controlled duopoly of a market, it's very hard to do innovation with no changes in the ecosystem. So the way I'm looking at it is like, there's actually a change in the ecosystem nowadays is with generative AI. I'm definitely seeing a potential wave of changes on the hardware side. It's upcoming. That said, we don't really believe that there's going to be a fundamental change of web services in the next couple of years. A lot of the services and capabilities will still be delivered through, the server-client interactions. You might end up changing your protocol from HTTP to MCP for your to use, and it's going to be, like on the client side, agent calling you rather than a core developer. But still, a lot of those will be actually served from new hardwares. So I'm definitely seeing that change. And when that change is coming, the tradition of doing the client side of development on the mobile side will change. So that's basically, I'm seeing a paradigm shift in which the unified developer experiences will be able to gain tractions again. So that's one thing. And if you see a traction happening, what we believe in is probably going to be happening in open source rather than having a very close ecosystem to do that change. So that's where my frames comes in. Yeah.
Nice, thank you. I'm going to circle back to you, Saurabh, because while we're on the theme, you've seen firsthand what it takes to scale tech at Amazon and Google. And you would have seen some hidden costs in native development teams. And how have you seen organizations try to reduce some of those pain points and the hidden costs?
Yeah, very important question. So first of all app developers, face these fragmentation challenges, right? As you also mentioned, but the problem becomes much more intense when we talk about these large native teams, because they work across markets. Their apps tend to be much more complex, right? So the hidden costs, in their case, much more pronounced is again slower development cycles, and more importantly, it becomes very hard for them to penetrate into new markets where other services might be more prevalent, right? So multiple companies employ different strategies, right? A lot of them use React Native and Flutter kind of cross-platform frameworks, and these frameworks, of course, help significantly on UI and business logic, but they again fail when it comes to service integration layer. And the reason is, of course, because these different, these cross-platform frameworks don't provide an interoperability, right? So again, even using these cross-platform frameworks, the clients, the app developers have to incorporate each SDK from different service providers one by one, right? And then this is essentially where a project like Open Mobile Hub is trying to solve by providing unified and modular APIs. And then, of course, we'll talk more about that. But essentially, OMH already has maps, authentication, and cloud storage. And in the future, we'll work with different industry providers to identify and solve for more service providers.
Thanks, Saurabh. Daniel, in your work with Open Wallet Foundation, beg your pardon, how important is it to you and your community that cross-platform frameworks allow interoperability for services like payments and identity?
Yeah, Hilary, I think you almost answered the question for me. So I'm Daniel Goldschei. I launched the Open Wallet Foundation, which is another project at the Linux Foundation. Can I ask you in the audience, who here came from outside the United States? You probably used a passport, right? And you took for granted that that passport is going to work at the border, and people are able to look at that passport, read the information. Who here checked in a hotel and used a credit card? Okay, that's almost all of you, and you took for granted that you can use pretty much any credit card, and people at the reception are able to use that. So the interesting thing is that we're in danger of losing that. You're taking this for granted. You're taking for granted that you have a passport or a driver's license or a credit card, maybe a vaccination proof, and you can use it pretty much anywhere in the world. But in a digital world, this is not granted, and it's certainly not something that that will happen without us really fighting for it, because there are so many standards. There are different credential formats. There are different protocols to communicate those credentials. As we've heard, there are different operating systems, 2 very large ones, a number of operating systems that are starting to gain traction, and purely defensively, if we want to retain capabilities we have today, we need to ensure that different vendors, different countries, different standardization organizations, different open source projects are finding ways to work together. So the short answer to your question, Hilary, super important. And of course, we don't want to look at it just defensively. We want to go beyond that. We want to create capabilities that you couldn't do with a physical passport. So for instance, if you after a long day here at the Open Source Summit, you go to a bar and you look young and they want to see your ID to prove that, I don't know, here in Colorado, older than 18, 21, whatever the age is, you have to show them a piece of ID, and that piece of ID is going to reveal a lot of information. maybe a photo, a first name, a last name, a complete date of birth, maybe your address. None of that is needed, not even the complete date of birth. I don't need to know that you were born on March 15th. I just need to have a flag older than whatever it is here, 21. So all of those things are things we need to create and we need to agree on. And we definitely hope that with, on the one hand, tools like the ones that we're discussing here, and on the other hand, by bringing together different industries and governments to agree on the frameworks, the legal frameworks, that we will be able to do that.
Hear, hear. Now I'm going to show it's your turn.
Yeah.
All right. So in your work, your in-app purchase module tackles one of the most complex areas, which is payments. Having come from the banking industry, I know that it's no fun when your money doesn't land, and that if it's a lot of money, that someone's waiting for interest on that money. So I understand that pain point. But in terms of developer pain points, what lessons have you learned that could inform how projects like Open Mobile have prioritized service APIs to improve cross-platform support?
First of all, I'm from South Korea. I just had a long flight the day before yesterday, 15 hours. And I have been working on the mobile platform for like more than 10 years now. And I work with many startups in South Korea. So back to the question, I've been working on in-app purchase module for like more than 6 years now, and most developers actually don't want to care about the platform-specific APIs. They just want to build the product really fast. So in my opinion, I also agree with them, because something like reset validation, which is one of the important API in IAP, I think they don't have to worry about that API differs in iOS or Android or other platforms. They have to just develop those, integrate those APIs. But so I feel like we need some unified API so developers don't have to care about all those stuff. And I think the Open Mobile Hub has the opportunity to unify all those things, so that I think it will improve the developer experience really dramatically. When there's a unified API that we don't have to care much about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the vision. So this is for all panelists. This next question. Our upcoming research is showing that teams adopting cross-platform frameworks are seeing productivity gains approximating 30% or more. What do you think needs to happen for even more teams to realize these benefits and accelerate adoption across the industry? How do we build on a good thing? Who would like to start?
I would say because I have a technical product background, so the first thing when I hear about that line is what persona that we're talking about. I would highly recommend us to look into the different personas from the angle aspect of how many existing platforms we're already building on, and how many frameworks we're already adopting as a core metrics. So the way I'm kind of looking at it is it's extremely difficult to convert any mature users which already has one platform developed. For instance, the company might already have an iOS app being built. It's relatively hard to convert such a user to adopt, I would say, universal platforms. I personally had a lot of those discussions internally when I was working on that. So it's if you already have an iOS product, are you going to be building on React Native next, or Android? The typical answer is the latter. So we do have our perfect personas nowadays in terms of for the new users, which are especially as we call cross chasm, the visionaries who are actually going to be building new product and new APIs on the Jang AI front, I would highly recommend starting with them to be able to pretty much build some of the new APIs into the new paradigm and make them offer, instead of trying to do a replacement of their existing offerings. Let them know that, hey, this is this plus something new. And if you want to jump onto the bandwagon of this new initiative and these new experiences, begin with this, not the classic version of it. So that would be my general thoughts. Yeah, start small and targeting the visionaries for the LLM users. That's my recommendation.
So I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'll just come with a quick teaser. You're going to see on a slide a collaboration between Google and OMH with regards to multipass, and I think that's a really good role model.
Yeah. From our perspective, as we discussed, right, these cross-platform frameworks still don't solve for service layer challenges, right? To continue Richard's example, let's say a new user is looking to develop with React Native, and they want to use maps. So today, and they want to use Google Maps, Mapbox, let's say these two, in two different markets. So today, they would have to learn two different APIs because these two SDKs behave differently. They would have to maintain two different builds. And then there's a cost overhead of maintaining and making any new updates. There's a scenario one. Scenario two, let's say there's an option that these developers can just adopt one OMH API, Maps API, and then Maps API, OMH API in the background does an abstraction with these two different Mapbox and Google Maps. And this would allow the developers to time faster to the market and avoid all these cost overheads. So I think as OMH matures and more of these services are available via unified API, I think that would be really helpful in increasing this from 30% to maybe 70%.
Okay, I'll just add shortly because I always wondered why the mobile framework doesn't have the open mobile spec, something like browser spec, because the company has for in-app purchases, they have the different features. So it's really hard to unify those APIs even when I develop my module. So I think if they can collaborate to make the open spec, then it will increase a lot of productivity.
Thank you. My question for the community as a consumer and a user is how do we convince application developers to develop beyond iOS? As an Android user, there are many organizations, big ones, global ones, don't even have an Android app. I hope they can take your approach, Richard, and they're going to go into some other type of application to start small and think about other platforms. And I will go back to Daniel on building trusted wallets. This often requires deep platform integration. How can open standards and APIs overcome the grip of platform defaults?
Yeah, I think you have a couple of challenges. So one, you don't want one or a handful of companies completely dominating the development. But two, you also want probably to avoid a situation where a country that you live in forces you to download an app. So you get a new phone, whether it's an Android phone or an iOS phone, and the first thing you hear is your government telling you that you have to download an app or a set of apps. So we want choice, and in order to have that choice, I think it is paramount to have two things. One, on the technical side. One, of course, you need standards. And this is intuitively probably easy to grasp. Without standards, if we all use different credential formats or different payment tokens, it's not going to work. What's probably a little less clear, unless you think about it deeply, is why do you need open source? So if you and I speak the same language because we use the same standard, why use open source? And we can simply rely on those standards. I heard an interesting number. Google thinks that there are about 700 standards that factor into a modern web browser. And you're going to see something like that in digital wallets as well. So digital wallet is not using one standard or two standards, but dozens or probably hundreds of standards. Everything from credential formats to protocols to NFC to Bluetooth to... And now all of this has to work together, from your face recognition for authentication and even if we all in this room agree to use the exact same standards, if you have so many standards, we can reintroduce friction because we're using and combining these standards differently. And I think this is where open source in general can help, and this is where something like OMH in particular can help, because you want to be able to do that ideally across different mobile operating systems, and probably even other operating systems in the future, like smartwatches. And I think hopefully this is something that you guys are going to solve.
We'll try.
All right, back to you, Saurabh. Plug and play switching. Let's talk about that. It's a concept for giving developers more control and flexibility. How can modular APIs enable this kind of adaptability and maintain a smooth, consistent developer experience?
Yeah, no, plug and play is definitely a very exciting concept because fundamentally it switches control from platform vendors. We talked about lack of choices. Switches control from platform vendors to developers and ultimately the users, right? So Daniel, you talked about choices, and OMH is all about, with plug and play, it's all about giving developers easy choices to not be constrained with one SDK once they integrate, but to have a choice of switching the SDK from time to time or from one market to the next market, right? And you talked about the APIs, Hilary. So of course the key part is abstraction of these APIs, right? So again, taking the example of maps, OMH maps, for example, abstracts away all the underlying SDKs and takes out the complexity for developers, and they could just learn one API instead of multiple APIs, and this really helps in smoothing the developer experience. And that's a key goal of OMH, to make the developer's life easier and to provide them more choices to adopt different SDKs of their choice.
Great. Richard, let's talk about working across environments and how open source communities can remain inclusive and relevant. You've done a lot of advocacy through your work in open source projects. What is your pathway toward inclusivity across the globe?
Right. I guess, we did talk about the user experience. I think one of the mobile experiences, as we recall, we do see a very clear difference between different geolocations in terms of how the experience is being built and consumed. So for instance, in the Western world, we have a lot of SaaS products. You probably have your Cash App, your Venmo, and all sort of life experience being break down into 5 or 6 mobile applications. But in China, you just need Alipay to get most of the things done. So being able to comprehensively understand, I would say, the different user experience requirements on different geolocations is a critical piece of how we are going to be building an experience which the developer likes as well. So for instance, we're actually building the developer experience in Alipay is more like a super app, plus as we call a lot of small mini programs building into the ecosystem. But the benefits for that is a lot of the mini programs can be more like the web experiences as we see being integrated. That's more transition interfaces, like small changes left and right. And all of those, I would say, design paradigms in which we need to incorporate into our open source framework design in order for us to have so-called this universal, I would say, framework, which I would say aim to address the problems that we describe, is to build once and run everywhere. That area, I believe, like include a lot of geolocations, different cultures. I would say just like maybe end with a call to action that I think for the language UI, as we all coming into adopt in the next generation with all the language features of chat and maybe agents built into place, similar things will apply. I would highly make a call to the OMH framework to maybe look a little bit more ahead of time and trying to incorporate some of those features into our existing framework. That's going to be adding a pretty great competitive advantage in terms of getting new adoptions.
Nice. I have questions for all panelists now, and we have about 5 minutes, so I'll ask everybody to keep answers fairly concise. So to everyone, if we fully embrace the vision of build once and deploy anywhere, what kind of innovation do you think this is going to unlock? Hyo, let's start with you. Or we can start with anybody else. We'll come back to you. Who wants to start?
Yeah, I think as we discussed, right, there isn't a way today to truly build once, deploy, or run everywhere, right? But if we're able to resolve this service layer challenge, it would allow developers to, even like more so smaller developers who don't have so many resources. It would allow them to develop faster, develop for multiple markets, and this would lead to much better innovation rate and much vibrant mobile ecosystem. So I know, like partnering with maintainers like Hyo and more such maintainers of crucial mobile services, that's a key goal in terms of achieving this dream.
Okay, I just thought of one. Like these days we are like coding with AI, not ourselves. And when I ask AI to integrate some of APIs, they have really fragmented implementations that I have to chat a lot of time. But if we have unified API, it will make AI much easier to implement our features. So I think, yeah, it will be good for AI.
Promise of AI, very good. Good. Daniel, what are you excited about?
Yeah, I think you mentioned the challenges for small companies to do this, and I think that's absolutely the case. And then on the other end of the spectrum, if you're a very large company and you want to deploy, in our case, for instance, a wallet, and you want that wallet to function with transportation systems in 100 countries or 150 countries and in 1,000 cities, that becomes challenging even for a large company. Yeah. So I think on both ends of the spectrum, there are great reasons to try and create frameworks that make these localizations and basically work across platforms as easy as possible. And I think that's why whether you are a large or a small company, we should all be rooting for these frameworks to take flight.
Richard?
And for me, because I'm a very pragmatic person, I believe like when you want to predict the future, you want to look into the past. So I've been pretty much looking into a lot in terms of how this whole mobile development began at the very beginning. And one thing which I realized is the first version of the mobile app actually looks very similar to websites, right? It's pretty much just this hosted frame with iframe and everything in there is HTML. But we've been going through a lot since then. And the critical changes for the first iteration of native app begins with a native API. So for instance, the phone allows you to have this location API, and the Foursquare app, the first version of Foursquare app to me is more like a demo for this location API. So the way I'm looking at it is like, if you really want to write once and build for the future, we want to look for these new scenarios which are enabled by the smart application. So for instance, if we just think about the location, I would imagine there will be a smart predictive analytics way of using our app. And that API doesn't exist at this moment. It's not get map, it's like get map and make recommendation. Whichever framework is able to implement that API first, we'll be able to have a competitive edge in the next round of, I would say, universal mobile development platform. Yeah, so that's my take.
Okay. We are almost out of time for the panel discussion, but I want to conclude with, in just a few words from each of you, 1 or 2 words if you can do it. What is the most exciting trend for shaping the future of open source mobile development? What trend are you excited about? And we can have repeat answers.
Yeah, I guess I'll just repeat mine. It's a language UI and new UI component. I believe, yeah, such a thing doesn't exist now. Yeah.
I think one of it is probably AI and how AI is going to democratize access to so many more people who are unable to do it today.
Yeah, of course, AI is definitely one, but on a different take, what we have noticed, and Daniel, you probably have noticed it as well, is that there is much more willingness even from large companies to collaborate on such open source frameworks and projects. So I think that if that trend continues, it should really help the ecosystem overall.
Oh yeah, recently what I am looking for was that the Swift build has been open source their language, so I think more bigger companies are realizing issues on the cross-platform fragmentation. So I think I'm looking forward to the unified builds also.
Excellent. Okay, a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so very much. And next up, and welcome Diego Zuluaga, who's going to give a 10-minute spotlight on Open Mobile Hub, an open source project tackling day-to-day challenges developers face in building for Android, iOS, and beyond. And so, Diego, you can take the slide away. There you go. Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Diego Zuluaga, and I'm going to do like a very quick round of slides with some videos about what is OMH. So the first part is, this part you're already familiar, right? Like the fragmentation in the mobile ecosystem given because of the specific vendor SDKs or manufacturer-specific SDKs. And we know that the biggest challenge right now, one of the biggest, is the dependency with Google mobile services. That leads to all the fragmentation that developers need to build. They need to create all these different builds for each particular OEM, and that drives developers crazy. I'm a developer myself, and I don't enjoy having to build the same thing for multiple places. I long the web when we are able to do this once. So now, the next part is the renaissance of OEM independent SDKs. So yeah, that helped to build these SDKs, that helped to make them more independent, but still we are in the side of there are no interfaces, common interfaces across these SDKs. That's still an issue, and that's continued to be like a whack-a-mole game for developers. So it's very challenging to overcome those issues still. And that's the stage where we are in. And what we believe with OMH is what we want is a layer on top of those SDKs that creates an abstraction of these services, and at the same time, it's available for all these cross-platform frameworks. So with OMH, what we envision is on top of the cross-platform frameworks like Kotlin multi-platform, Compose multi-platform, React Native, and Flutter, and so on, we need interfaces that abstract away these services. And that's what we've been building for OMH in OMH 2.0. And in 3.0, we recognize that building these independently as standalone modules is very challenging. And that's the power of open source, right? Most of the modules, for instance, React Native IAP from Hio, or many other modules from Google, like Flutter IAP, are already part of the open source community. Why not coming together and contributing to these projects directly, right? And that's the part that we are participating on right now in digital identity. And at the end of the day, the architecture looks to something like this, right? So, sorry. Right now, the layer one of the OMH is what used to be Android native and iOS. These introduce still fragmentation because most of these layer one require a lot of plugins, a lot of dependencies. But with Kotlin multi-platform, you can cover native apps as well as cross-platform. And I believe that's the trend that is happening in cross-platform development, that there's going to be like the foundation of the cross-platform developers and native apps. And on top of that, there will be wrappers on top of these cross-platform frameworks. So for React Native and Flutter and many other cross-platform frameworks, you could be wrappers on top of the existing foundation. So this is the approach that we've been taking. And also one component is the plugin capabilities of these frameworks. Right now, many of the frameworks that are in the market come with hard-coded plugins, unfortunately. So they come with the usual capabilities. GMS, Google Play Billing, for instance, and a store kit from from Apple. And it's very difficult for a developer to take and find a marketplace where they can actually find different plugins that meet the standard of the interface. So with OMH 3.0, that's what we envisioned and we started to build. To give you an idea of what it looks like, in this case, OMH supports multiple map providers. This is an example of location sharing. So in this case, Mapbox has, I'm gonna play the video that this is the same app across different service providers and across different platforms. In this case, you see an app, the same app sharing the location using Mapbox, OpenStreetMaps, Azure Maps, Google Maps, and Apple Maps. The developer didn't have to write this app multiple times, integrate with multiple SDKs. They only had to write it once. But what we did different with OMH is to build that interface on top of that. Now, the implementation of this in React Native, which is one of the frameworks that we support, is very simple. We created the plugins. The developers just need to declare which plugins they are going to use. So in this case, you specify one of these 4 different providers. And then, as part of the OMH Maps module, you declare how you're going to behave depending on the device. So if you're running on a GMS device, you're going to probably want to use Google Maps. Or maybe you can switch on the fly during runtime that service provider. If you are going to run on a non-GMS device, you can switch the provider, and iOS is the same. All right? So the implementation of OMH Maps also, now the declaring and displaying, it's very simple. In a React Native app, it's just declaring the OMH Map view component. And we have support for markers, polygons, and polylines. I'm not going to explain in detail this, but this is very common notation in React Native, which is pretty much basic, declaring the object, and inside nested of that object, you declare other components that have impact the UI, for example, in this case of a map in Mapbox. All right? Implementations that we have done in the past, one is Expensify Signal, that in the past used to generate this error. Now we are able to generate the map successfully. And in terms of Expensify, it's the ability to provide different capabilities. In this case, you can see that you can switch back and forth from one map provider to another. So you have Google Maps, you have other providers like Mapbox or OpenStreetMaps. So here the user is choosing which street to display, and they can switch easily from Google Maps to OpenStreetMaps. So the developer didn't have to write a single line of code in addition to support another map provider. This is our documentation. It's github.com/openmobilehub. All our code is open source. And we are in OMH 2.0. We include getting started guides and sample apps and some code labs to get you started very quickly. Now that I'm almost closing, cloud storage and out modules also support the same paradigm that we implement with OMH Maps, which is supporting different service providers and different authentication providers. So in this case, Dropbox, Google Drive, and OneDrive are also supported in OMH. Now, one project in addition to OMH is our collaboration with Google. And Daniel mentioned Multipass, right? With Multipass, what we are working with the Google team is we share the same principles and same goals, making available libraries to developers that run on any device. So in this case, Multipass enabled digital identity. And with digital identity, you get the benefits of mobile driver's license, and different other standards that are part of the credentials. This is a project that is part of Open Wallet Foundation, and it's the engine that runs Google Wallet, and also the European Union Wallet. We're contributing to the team by, of course, contributing to the core libraries, but also as part of the developer program to help grow these SDKs in the developer community. So if you are interested in learning more about Multipass and how you can get involved, also let us know. We are part of this team. All right. With that, the last slide was our in-app purchases PRD. This is a product development that is still in the early stages. We are trying to come up with a unified interface. Right now, in it, we highlight the new architecture based on Kotlin multi-platform and all the cross-platform on top of us wrappers, and all the challenges. So if any of you guys are interested in learning how to be part of this or be part of this initiative, we're also welcoming anyone to join us. All right. I think that's it. Thank you.
If there are questions, yeah, do you? Here, I'm going to bring you the mic.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation. Yeah, so my question is regarding so you mentioned build once, deploy everywhere, right? So I have seen that it's able, we have that, okay, we're getting close there in terms of the functionality, right? But then my question is regarding the UI and the UX perspective, right? So Apple and Android, they have different standards in terms of UI and UX. Have you guys considered that, or is there like a specific scope? Is that out of scope? Are you only focusing on functionality, or are you looking at the UI and UX too?
That's right. Oh, that's pretty loud. As part of the OMH, and we run we are not inventing a new framework, of course. Definitely the cross-platform frameworks are here to stay. We are here to contribute to those frameworks. Definitely Kotlin multi-platform, React Native, and Flutter acknowledge that they have a different look and feel based on the platform, right? So they already have, for instance, React Native paper for material design on Android, and on iOS they have a different look and feel. So they render differently based on the platform as well. So what we do is to adhere to those standards, and we respect each platform UI.
Okay, thank you.
Cool.
Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate your time and attention. And please go to Open Mobile Hub Project to learn more, or visit linuxfoundation.org/research to learn more. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any one of us who you heard from on the panel, Diego Zuluaga or myself, and get to know open source, open application development for the mobile ecosystem. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.